Hi there. In this video I am going to be just doing a sketch from memory. I'm using basically, you might hear other artists talk about having a visual library, which is essentially just a kind of posh way of saying things that you can remember, pictures that you've got in your mind that you can replicate. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of drawing upon the lessons that I've learned from all of the practice videos that you've seen me doing, and I'm just kind of doing it my own way. What you saw then was me trying to do like a square, or basically trying to draw someone else's way, which never really works very well for me. I kind of have my own way of doing things. Maybe it's not the most efficient way. Maybe I'll change in future to a more contemporary way of doing it, but I just I find it easier for me to just throw the shapes that I can see down on the paper and then refine them afterwards. And not stick to these rigid rules about something being X number of heads high, or using the Loomis method for heads and all this sort of thing. I just draw what I see. I'm kind of working on getting my accuracy right, as you can see. I mean, at this moment in time, it's kind of hard to see what I'm trying to achieve, because I'm at the very early stages, but you'll see it slowly come together as I'm working. And I haven't actually sped this video up at all. You're actually seeing in real time me draw this one, because the idea is that I'm practicing my sketching with a view to trying to get my drawing faster. So that's basically what I'm doing. I obviously always start off with the head. Usually I'll start off with the eyes, but because the eyes aren't the major feature in this drawing, I'm actually just throwing down the line work for basically the whole upper body, and then I'll refine it as I go along and thicken up whatever lines I need to thicken up. I'm shading. I'm not going to bother colouring this one. It's all going to be cross hatching and scribble shading. So I'm just kind of measuring out where I want the shoulders to be, and obviously that's going to be changed as I go along as well. Everything's fairly fluid in this sort of style of drawing. You're just throwing down lines and hoping that they fall in the right place, making the most of any happy accidents you have. And because I'm not trying to copy some other drawing, there's no rigid rules as to whether or not something looks good or bad. Usually when I do digital painting or digital drawing like this, I will be constantly changing my line width, but I basically didn't touch the hotkeys at all during this drawing, other than to change between pencil and eraser tools, or sorry, brush and eraser tools. So yeah, it's all the same line thickness. Essentially, it's mimicking as if I were actually drawing with a pencil. Except obviously with the real pencil you have the luxury of having the tilt function, which I will eventually get when I can afford to buy a good drawing tablet. Still using the iPad Pro at the moment, but it gets the job done more or less. So once I've got the dimensions for the rib cage and the hip, I'll actually change the angle of the hip slightly to match the pose that I'm trying to accomplish. And then throw in roughly where the rib cage is. Only because the rib cage will help me line up the lines of the hips and also the breasts. As you can see, again, nothing's really sort of concrete. I'm just throwing down lines and seeing what I see, basically. Now just roughing out where the breasts are. It's again, this line in particular is going to be one that's going to move quite a bit, because obviously you're always optimistic when you draw them to start with, and then change things as you go along. But I've got other points of reference that I'm going to use. Obviously the hip, the bottom of the rib cage, and that where that goes into the waist, and then the hip. are going to be quite key at this point. And the beauty of doing this digitally is you're not committing to anything at any point, because you can always just delete and start again. You know, it's not like paper where you have to kind of limit the amount of times that you use an eraser. The beauty of this style of drawing is that you can just keep deleting and redrawing as many times as you want to until you get the shape that you want, which is something that I take advantage of quite a lot. I kind of decided that this pose doesn't look quite dynamic enough with the rib cage where it was, so I'm going to bring it in a bit and see what impact that has. It's always kind of hard to judge when you first start drawing something like this, whether your lines are good or not. Until you start shading and putting in the fine detail, it's quite hard to sort of imagine the silhouette, dependent on what it is you're trying to achieve. I've decided to go with a blouse because it gives you a convenient way of mapping the center line of the body, because obviously the blouse buttons up down the center, so that kind of helps with defining the definition of the torso. I'm going to add some hair spilling over the shoulders just to help break up that area, because it is quite there's a lot of negative space on the shoulders. I think that might be why so many comic artists tend to draw sort of hair draping over the shoulders a bit, just to break up that negative space, because it can make a drawing look very, very dull. So I'm at the stage now where I've kind of blocked out the majority of the big shapes, so now I can start throwing in some of the details that are going to make this drawing look a little bit more interesting. It tends to be when, certainly my experience with doing this is that actually once you start adding in the small details like this, you have the ability to hide a lot of mistakes, such as things being slightly out of proportion or things being uneven. It just breaks up the lines enough that it stops the eye from picking up too much on the mistakes. I mean, realistically, if you were to sit and scrutinize, if you were to pick up, I don't know, one of the Marvel comic books or one of the DC comic books or whatever your fetish is, and actually scrutinize the drawings, almost every panel has got some kind of inconsistency or disproportionate area of the body or whatever. The idea is that these aren't paintings that someone's going to sit there and stare at for hours and hours on end. It's you know, as long as you can sell the drawing for the period of the time that the person's glancing at it, that's all that really matters. So it hasn't got to be absolutely perfect, it's just got to be good enough that the person looking at it's not going to sit there and think, well, this is just unrealistic, and you know, you're expecting the viewer to suspend their disbelief to a certain extent. I mean, if you're the kind of person who will sit there and complain about a movie because of it being unrealistic for whatever reason or something like that, you know, you're not really suspending disbelief. You're kind of missing the point of the movie, to be honest. But I mean, anybody, you know, at the end of the day, this is not a real person. This is just a drawing from memory. So, you know, you can choose to either see the character or not. So now I'm just going to throw in a little bit more detail on the face. Again, not going to go too mad. Just going to rough out the details. Move things around with the lasso tool and the move tool. Get those details where I want them to be, more or less. I mean, this is just a digital sketch. It's not meant to be an amazing work of art. If it turns out good, I'll be happy. If it doesn't, well, I'm still learning. I'm thinking I'm going to give this character glasses again, just to kind of add a little bit more interest to the face. It's not something I've done in any of the drawings I've done to this point, so I think I'm going to throw some in there just to have a go and see if I can get them looking decent. Once I've got the facial features where I want them to be. Okay, so as you can see, using the lasso tool and the move tool just to make everything look a little bit more evenly balanced, straighten up anything that I might have put slightly on the wonk. And then just basically adding a bit of shading around the neck. Hair is still something I struggle with, so I'm not going to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to refine it. I'm just going to throw in some indication lines just to show where the hair is flowing to and from, and then call it quits on that, just because, as I said, I don't want to stress out about it, don't want to make too much of a big deal out of it. As long as you can see that that's what it is and it's not some weird octopus sitting on her head, then I'm quite happy. So throwing in the glasses now, nothing spectacular, just a couple of sort of standard frames. And I'm just going to basically start just adding some shading now, and thickening up some lines where I feel like it's necessary. Again, remember this is a sketch, so you know I'm not going to spend hours trying to finish it or anything like that. I'm just going to throw in some shading to give you an idea of where the areas of light and dark are. But I'm going to just crack on with that and leave you guys to it. So thanks very much for watching. Hope you found it interesting. Stay until the end and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.